Virtue ethics is the last of the big three ethical theories that we're going to talk about after consequentialism and deontology. Now, virtue ethics has really ancient roots, all the way back to ancient Greece, and you can even trace it even farther back in ancient Chinese philosophy. But it's also had a pretty modern contemporary revival back in the 1950s. And so we'll need to kind of explore both sides of this view and talk about its ancient roots, its modern sort of rediscovery, revival, and look at the contemporary issues that the view is facing nowadays. Let's get into it. Virtue ethics at its core is really different from the other two theories that we've been looking at. With consequentialism and deontology, the main question that we're asking is what someone ought to do. What action ought they take? It's action focused. Virtue ethics is asking a different kind of question. It's asking, what kind of person should I be? How should I live my life? This makes virtue ethics agent-centered instead of act-centered. It's focused on the individual, not the acts in which they are engaged. And that's a really different way of thinking about ethics. You can get kind of bogged down in some of the terminology here. So at least for the ancient stuff, and it still kind of comes through today in the modern contemporary stuff, these three terms are going to pop up a whole lot. Arete. This is what gets translated as virtue nowadays. Virtue, though, doesn't quite mean the same thing to the ancients that it means to us today, so we're going to have to sort of unpack that connection a little bit. Phronesis is just this idea of practical wisdom. It's something that you develop over time. It's not like, it's not book smarts, it's street smarts kind of thing. And then eudaimonia. This is a tricky kind of term. It's really fun to say. It is often translated as happiness, but it is far more than that. It is, the definition that we have here is sort of the proper formal definition of eudaimonia, this activity of the soul, of the intellect in accordance with virtue. So eudaimonia is this standard of a good life. Somebody who is living well has flourished, has, achieved this idea of eudaimonia. Now, when we're talking about virtue ethics and how different it is, one thing that is kind of important to keep in mind is virtually any ethical theory is going to be able to accommodate this idea of virtues. And by virtues, I just mean like the modern understanding of virtues, kindness, honesty, empathy, that kind of stuff. But it's only virtue ethics that's going to sort of treat them as this irreducible or foundational, you can't define them in terms of other things. They just sort of are what they are. They're not just going to be reducible to, consequences or duties like a consequentialist or a deontologist might try and cash them out. Let's sort of look at how a virtue ethicist might try to sort of capture what's going on in a particular case. So we can all agree that, helping somebody is going to be a morally correct thing to do. It's a nice thing to do. And we're going to have, depending on what theory we're looking at, we're going to have a very different story as to why helping someone is morally correct. For a consequentialist, right, helping them is going to maximize happiness, well-being, whatever, right? It's going to maximize the good. For deontology, there's going to be some kind of moral law in place. Now, it would be, we've talked about this, it would be an imperfect duty for Kant, but there is still some moral law in place, maybe the golden rule or something like that, that's going to, be defining that as a morally correct action. For virtue ethics, though, remember, it's agent-centered. So what we're going to say about the act is that, it manifests these particular virtues, right? So I am looking at what it does for the agent. Oh, an agent who helps somebody is manifesting these virtues of benevolence or charitability or whatever. And so this is going to reveal something about their moral character. And that's really, like, it's so important to understand this very, very key idea about virtue ethics. It is focused on agents and not on acts. Okay. So, again, consequentialism, deontology, ask us, what should I do? Virtue ethics asks us, how should I live? And what we're going to see is that, like, there is going to be some kind of really fundamental disagreement between different virtue ethical theories. We're going to be looking at two sort of contemporary approaches to virtue ethics later on in this module, and you'll see then, like, how foundational the disagreement is. They're even going to disagree about, like, the basic approach to, like, what an ethical theory should even do in the first place. So you're going to get a wide variety of different views. So what we're going to do here is just kind of skim the surface. We'll talk about the ancient stuff and sort of how we got here. And then we're going to look at sort of the problems that contemporary theories that are virtue ethical theories need to kind of face in order to get off the ground, and the kind of objections they need to deal with. So we won't be looking like too specifically at, like, you know, like a deep dive into a particular theory, but rather different kind of approaches. But in the next video, we'll talk about Aristotle and sort of the framework that he uses to help build virtue ethics, and it's still this framework upon which most of the theory still rests. I'll see you then.